have Michigan State went to Minneapolis at Minnesota and they lost. This was a game that, Michigan kind of needed a good road win for them. Minnesota is a good team. I don't think they're recognized as a great team. I don't even think their own fans would recognize them as a great team, but they're obviously much improved this year, and it would have been respectable for Michigan State to go in there and get the win. However, it just wasn't a great game for Michigan State, and Minnesota was able to take care of business in this one. Evan, I'm curious, what were your thoughts on the Michigan State and Minnesota game?
Yeah, this was a big week for Michigan State. You're coming into it because you had obviously the game at Minnesota, which going to, I thought they were going to take care of business, really not have too much trouble with them. Like you said, Minnesota is much improved compared to last year, but they were pretty awful last year, so it doesn't take much to be improved. But you got this game, then you have Illinois coming to East Lansing on Saturday, so you really had Michigan State had a really good opportunity to kind of get two really big wins to kind of maybe cement themselves as a top 4 team in the Big Ten. And they're off to a really bad start. Obviously give credit to Minnesota, taking care of business at home. Guys like, Christie, stepping up, he's been a pretty awesome freshman all year. Could definitely have the argument, is he better than his brother was at Michigan State a couple years ago. But yeah, definitely impressive win for Minnesota. And yeah, it's an interesting season for Michigan State. Obviously they came into the year as, pick to win the Big Ten, or if not second, finish maybe second to Purdue, and things have not gone well for them in comparison.
Yeah, I mean, Tyson Walker has been everything that you would want, but
been their only thing sometimes, yeah.
Right, like that's the only thing though that they wanted. They've had some other guys show up. Hall, Malik Hall has been okay from time to time, and Akins has been fine from time to time. But it's the issue of the inconsistency and them not really showing up. It's funny because at the beginning of the year, I said Illinois needs to be more consistent, and it's kind of like flip flopped. With Michigan State is now that kind of inconsistent team that's not really able to do what they need to do, and Illinois, while they're struggling by their standards right now. They are not really so much the same way. Now we'll see what happens with them in Northwestern tonight. So I might eat those words, but it's going to be interesting for sure. And I think you're right, Evan. Cam Christie, very underrated freshman in the Big Ten this year. He's one that does not get enough credit, I think, for how good he's been, and he's really he's changed this Gophers program in a good way. Brant, what are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I mean, for me, Michigan State just doesn't really have a dog mentality, in my opinion. And it comes down to, Tyson Walker, I think, does. He can hit big shots. But when it comes down to all the supporting cast, like you said, you just don't have guys who it really seems like are giving their all and can do things that make it a winning program. AJ Hoggett is a guy who comes to mind that just isn't playing up to preseason expectations. And he was a guy, as a senior point guard that you really expected to have this team. They were top 5 preseason for a reason, and he was one of those pieces that you really expected to have a good season. Back to Cam Christie, though, I'm gonna put my foot down on the fact that he should be the Big Ten Freshman of the Year, and I don't. Indiana fans will tell you it should be McKenzie. I think they're wrong. I think Cam Christie has done a lot more for Minnesota than McKenzie Mbako has done for Indiana. That'll be interesting to see, how that race kind of unfolds down the stretch. But the things he's done for Minnesota have really been insane. Like, you see Minnesota there with 6 conference wins this year. I expected them to have half of that for the entire year. This team was horrendous last year, and it didn't seem like that they did a lot during the offseason to change that. But I underestimated Ben Johnson. He's come out and his guys play hard every single game. They may not be the most talented team in the conference, but you're going to get a hard-fought game from them. And that's a lot more than you can say for some of these Big Ten teams.
Yeah, if the Big Ten tournament started today, they get the double bye as the 4 seed.
Yeah.
Which is wild.
Yeah. Insane.
Which is the credit to what Ben Johnson's done. I questioned some of the offseason moves. I didn't know if I trusted Elijah Hawkins making the jump from Howard. He was at Howard last year, make the jump to a Big Ten team. He's been good. He's limited the turnovers in terms of like where he was at last year, where it was almost just like a 1-to-1 type thing at times where, yes, he might have 8 assists, but it was also 7 turnovers in the process. He didn't have like his best game yesterday, but still 6 assists. He's somebody that, when Minnesota needs something to be created, they can at least just throw it to him and run a pick and roll, and he'll be able to find a dude. Now you do surround him with shooters in Christie, in Mitchell, especially Christie, who's just been phenomenal for a large chunk of the season. Dawson Garcia is playing as a top 10-ish player in the conference, at least all Big Ten level for sure. And then Pharrell Payne has his moment. He's kind of like Payne's like Terrace Reed to me, where it's just you have some of these flashes and you're just like, man, he could be so good. Isn't there every game, but when the flashes are there, it's like, man, the dude's talented. Just 6'9", moves insanely well. And then even you get good energy off the bench now from Parker Fox, and they're not. I don't think Minnesota's a deep team at all. I think they're they trust 6 to 8 guys on any given night, but Parker Fox has been one of them, and good energy, is able to score. And it just seems like last year, when like I was kind of recapping the season and I was thinking of Minnesota, I was like, what was their identity? Like they just didn't have one. I don't think they knew who they were. Ben Johnson didn't quite know what he wanted to do. They have more of an identity this year, I think, especially offensively, of running more pick and rolls. You have your shooters, and then if you need to, you just have Garcia try and go get you a bucket, and he can do it in a variety of ways. So just more of a true identity this year. They're pretty solid defensively too. I think they do a good job of at times just mucking up the game if they need to. They can play a little bit faster. I think they're pretty adaptable, which has been important for them too. But yeah, credit to Ben Johnson, who we'll see how this rest of the season plays out, and they have a couple tough games coming up too. But Ben Johnson will have a legit case for Big Ten Coach of the Year, and if it's based like last year's voting, then it should be Ben Johnson over like Matt Painter.
Yeah, I mean, if we're being honest here, and I know this might upset some Michigan State fans for me to say this, and that's fine. Whatever. I've made fans mad before, and you'll get my mentions and tell me how stupid I am. Whatever. But like Minnesota and Michigan State, in my mind, should be flip-flopped. Like Michigan State is having the season that people perceive Minnesota to have, and Minnesota is having this season that kind of people perceive Michigan State is having, because people look at Michigan State and say like, oh yeah, this is a tournament team. I've said early on, this isn't a tournament team. Michigan State's not going to make the tournament. I know people are still saying they are, and we just had a guest on, Ryan, last time, who said he thinks he thinks they are going to make the tournament. And I don't see it. I don't see them being able to get the wins. I don't see them being impressive enough. The only way I see them getting into the tournament is if they're on the bubble and they just like do Tom Izzo a favor to keep like the tournament streak going, which, we can, talk about all those things. But, and one of the biggest reasons why is because the numbers don't like Minnesota as much. Minnesota is 73rd in KenPom. Their offense ranks 99th, and their defense ranks 48th. And so it's like when you only have one side of the ball inside the top 50, you're not doing as well. When in fact, I think Minnesota's just a better team. I don't think they're the better coached team, but at least in this game, I felt like Ben Johnson coached a better game than Tom Izzo did. And, like I said, it's not really something that people are going to take into account right away, but I think that's what we're looking at here, where this Minnesota team is better than Michigan State this year. And people need to start realizing that they probably have a better chance of making the tournament this year based on play alone, and not like, thoughts of, coaches and things like that instead of Michigan State. Is that crazy to say, Brant? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think that's crazy to say at all. I mean, you just saw Minnesota go out and outplay them and just kind of prove on the court they're the better team, given they were at home. But the game was right there for Michigan State taking, and they didn't take it. I think Minnesota is the better team at this point. I do not think that Michigan State's a tournament team. You can't count out Tom Izzo in March. He's still got a little time here to turn the season around. But at the same time, we've seen all these legendary coaches kind of fizzle out and retire over the past 2 years. And Tom Izzo, it just seems like is the next one up. I'd be honestly kind of surprised if we saw him back at Michigan State even next season. I think this could be his final rodeo potentially. If not, next season he might. I don't know if he'd be the type of guy to kind of declare before the season like Coach K. Okay, this is my final rodeo. I don't think he's that kind of guy. I think he'll kind of just ride off into the sunset when it's this time. And I could see it being this year, with NIL. Michigan State hasn't really been a team that's been in the transfer portal getting a lot of guys. So I think it's a new era of college basketball, and it's kind of surpassed Tom Izzo, in my opinion.
Yeah, when we look at like March, I think it's fair right now to say Minnesota is a better team than Michigan State. The thing that hurts Minnesota is they quite literally, like per KenPom, quite literally had the easiest non-conference schedule in the entire country. And so just that, which I don't blame, right? I don't blame Ben Johnson and Minnesota for scheduling that way when you have, they have 2 Big Ten wins last year and like 9 total. You just want to get some W's with a lot of new players, a pretty young team. You want to get a lot of W's early on, and maybe that, if they schedule harder, then they're struggling more in Big Ten because they haven't been able to figure out how to win. So totally don't blame them there. And that's where Michigan State's able to scrape by and still be in the tourney combo, is they have a couple good wins. Michigan State now has a very, very big game Saturday at home against Illinois. A win there is going to make things look a lot better. But their next 5, home at Illinois, or home against Illinois, at Penn State, at Michigan, home against Iowa, home against Ohio State. Like, obviously we just saw Wisconsin lose at Michigan today, so anything can happen, but you would assume Michigan State should be favored in all 5 of those, or at least 4 of those. And then the Illinois game is probably Illinois slightly. But they put themselves in this hole where they just can't afford losses, right? If they had picked off Minnesota at Minnesota, you can maybe afford to drop one in there. I don't know if they can do that anymore. They have the talent to win all 5, but we said earlier, I just don't know if they have the consistency for all their players to win all 5 of those before finishing up the season.
Even if Minnesota doesn't make the tournament, if they can make the NIT, that's such a big step for them as a program. Just trying to, especially if you can keep a lot of guys and just, get consistency and build continuity, it could be a huge kind of, jump into next season, into hopefully, finishing maybe in that top half of the Big Ten.
Yeah, for sure. I was just looking at the schedule here when Joe was talking about it for Minnesota and Michigan State, and it's so weird because I look at Michigan State, they have Illinois, at Penn State, at Michigan, Iowa, Ohio State, at Purdue, Northwestern, at Indiana. They have them winning all of those games except for one against Purdue, which, like, I don't know. Sure, based on the numbers, sure. But I don't believe in this Michigan State team that they're going to be able to do that. Call me a hater, whatever you want, that's fine. And then I look over at Minnesota's, and they have Minnesota going 4-5 in their last 9 games of the season. They have them losing away to Iowa, Purdue, obviously, away against Nebraska, away against Illinois, and then away at Northwestern. Like, yeah, those are hard games on the road, but I feel like Minnesota could pick up one of those. At least Iowa, they might be able to pick that one up, but we'll see. It's not an easy road toward the end of the season for Minnesota, but you're right, Evan. Even if they just get to the NIT, that's a huge step for them. So
I'd be curious to see how this Michigan State team, at the end of the year, how much it mirrors maybe last year's North Carolina team, where the year prior to that, they were an 8-9 seed in the tournament, made a run to the championship game, brought everybody back, were preseason number 1, and then were worse than mediocre last year. And then kind of the same thing with Michigan State. Last year they made a tournament run, weren't great last year, but made a run, brought everybody back, were preseason top 5, and now they find themselves kind of borderline mediocre at times.
This is all setting up Michigan State just sneaking into the first 4 and then going to like the Final Four somehow. That's what this is.
2021 or whatever.
That's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
They're just going to figure out a way, and then Hogarth's going to be like a top 3-point guard in the country for like a 4-game span. He's going to not miss, and somehow it'll just all work because that's just what Izzo does.
Yep.
Say Walker's going to have to, be playing National Player of the Year level for that to happen.
Yeah.
We have a few comments here. Ali Babwa, friend of the program, was on a football show one time. Appreciate you. Minnesota is currently 4th in the Big Ten. Yes, that won't hold, but it's impressive. No, I don't think it'll hold. Obviously, like we talked about the schedule there, but I could see them finishing in the top half of the Big Ten, which for them would be awesome based off what happened last year. Casual Big Ten, Kent, Parker, Fox, emphasis on the X, factor. Yes. Yeah. I wasn't even the one that mentioned him, Kent. So there you go. Somebody else mentioned him. That's a huge step. And then Sonny, I'm glad you brought this up. I do want to talk about this. So Michigan State is 12-2 at home. Only losses are to Wisconsin and Arizona. All right. Yes, I think that's important to look at. However, look at who they have beat at home. Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, Rutgers, Penn State, Indiana State, Stony Brook, Oakland. Baylor says semi-home. I don't know what that means. I guess that's in
Detroit.
Oh, yeah. That's right. Okay. Yeah, I still call that a neutral. Oh, and Arizona was a neutral, it says. So
yeah, we're forgetting that James Madison lost at home.
Oh, yes, there we go.
First game of the season,
Yeah. Okay, so not Arizona, it's James Madison instead. But like I look at like those 12 wins that they've had at home, and like no disrespect to those other teams, I just talked up Minnesota, but like it's not exactly any like high caliber wins at home. They have Illinois coming in at home on Saturday. So if they can get that one, but Sonny, I'm sure you don't want that to happen. So
yeah, they're fortunate that they're very fortunate, obviously, that they stomped Baylor, and then they're fortunate that the Indiana State win is doing very, very
incredible
well
right now. Yeah.
So that's helping the numbers a lot too.
I think, is that Indiana State a quad one? Is it top 35 or top 30? You have to be
30.
30. Okay. So they're 34th right now.
It might be 35. I can't remember, but
it's like borderline quad one if it isn't.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to the Big Ten Huddle. Please do like and subscribe. We appreciate that. If this was your first time listening, we are the Big Ten Huddle. We cover all things Big Ten football and basketball. We have a long episode every Sunday, Tuesday, and Wednesday night, all at 9 o'clock. So come in, check us out, get in the chat, let us know what you're thinking. We would love to have you join us and learn more about the Big Ten.